You might recall just a couple of years ago. Kitty, kitty. You might recall a couple years ago I did a review of miter gauges, 10 miter gauges in fact, and one of those was the Harvey MG-36. Unfortunately, I ended up disappointed in what I saw, not only with the engineering but also the customer service. I'll go ahead and leave a link for you in the description if you want to check out that full review. Fast forward a couple of years and Harvey now has their MG-36 Pro, and a bunch of you were asking me to review it, so I bought one. So my plan is to look at all the things that I found in the original MG-36 and see if they have either changed them or fixed them. And then of course any other big differences that I see along the way, good or bad, we'll talk about them. All right, let's get it on. Wait, no, not that kind of get it on. Just as with the original MG-36, the fit and finish on this thing is just next level. It's really a visual work of art, and the material and general build quality appears to be top notch. Let's talk money. I bought this unit back in August of 23 for $399, but with taxes and shipping it came to $447.91. Oof. That's a lot for a miter gauge. And yes, I do buy my own tools when I do a review. Harvey gives out free tools to influencers like it's cheese at Costco. So when you watch reviews, it's really important to know how they got it. Was it paid for? Is the review even paid for? These are things that are really important so that you can judge things with a grain of salt. And that includes anything coming from me. That's why it's important for me to let you know when I purchase something, what I paid for it, or if there's any other kind of relationship at play. Anyway, even though I paid almost $450 for mine, you can definitely get it cheaper depending on the day. In fact, on the day of this recording, the price of the Pro is $299. And oddly enough, the price of the old version is $399. Check back tomorrow and you'll see a completely different set of prices. After watching the company for a while, it's very clear to me that Harvey likes to play pricing games. So if you're gonna buy anything from them, I'd recommend waiting at least a week, maybe even more, to watch the daily price fluctuations and make sure you get it at the lowest point. They may honor their pricing too. If you paid more and you go there the next day and it's cheaper, maybe they will give you a refund, I don't know, but it's something to keep an eye on. The miter bar has been extended an inch from 21 inches to 22 inches, which is great because we can all use an extra inch. A longer bar generally means more support and greater capacity for wider workpieces. On the original MG-36, I showed that the last 7 inches of the miter bar was left relatively unsupported due to a lack of an additional concentric washer. On the Pro version, they not only added that additional washer, but changed the style and operation of the washers themselves. On the original, I had trouble keeping my settings as the tightening of the set screw would cause the washer to rotate beyond my desired set point. They resolved that issue by keeping the washers constrained with a friction fit, and you simply need to rotate the washer to snug it up in the miter slot. Now, I'm not sure if the lack of a set screw means that these things will be easier to knock out of calibration, but the good news is it's very easy to set it back to where you need it to be and then you're off and running again. Once the washers are set, the bar is rock solid in the slot while still being easy to push forward and back. On the original MG-36, I had a couple of major problems with the protractor head. One was the gap. There's supposed to be 1 degree of resolution, and I found that very hard to achieve with the gap that existed between the arrow and the scale. But on the Pro version, they included a new vernier scale that has 0.1 degree resolution. Now we're talking. The other issue was the sloppy detents, which was the real deal breaker for me. Just to refresh your memory, it felt like the pin just wasn't fully engaging with the detents, making each detent position feel unreliable. On the Pro version, there is some improvement. The detents do seem a little more snappy and more reliable, but the spring pin still feels too soft for my taste, and you can easily overshoot the detent if you're not careful. Watch these lines closely as I move in and out of the 90-degree detent. You can see that sometimes it nails it, other times it's slightly off, depending on how much speed and pressure I apply as I rotate the fence. Fortunately, the locking knob does seem to force the pin to drop fully into the detent most of the time. But this is something you definitely want to keep an eye on and verify. And thanks to the new vernier scale, you can actually do that. Another thing I recommend you do is give the fence a little wiggle. So whenever you change to a new detent, before tightening the knob, give the fence just a little shimmy, and you'll see that it tends to find the center point of the detent, giving you confidence that you can lock it down in that position and you'll have the setting you want. So this is definitely an improvement over the original MG-36, and this one is now what I would call serviceable. But ultimately, after looking at 2 versions of a miter gauge put out by Harvey, I gotta say, I am not a fan of the system they employ. The way it works, we have a spring pushing a round-headed pin into a detent that has sloped sides. In my opinion, it's a flawed design. Let me show you why. You have to excuse the kindergarten artwork here, but here is our little sort of V-shaped notch that serves as the detent. This is our pin with that rounded bottom, and then we have a spring that's pushing it down. The problem is that because this is rounded and we have this sloped side here, we wind up having a very small contact point, and there's really not a whole lot in the way of registration up against that pin. And the spring is also not super strong, so we wind up very easily just rotating right out of this. Between the roundness and this sloped wall, it's just far too easy to pull that pin out. Now, the whole point of a detent is to lock us in place, right? You have a good positive registration with a setting that you can absolutely count on. And let me show you a couple of examples. On the Jessem, they have a spring-loaded pin that pops into the detents with a satisfying snap. Cylindrical pin, cylindrical hole, and once it's in place, you simply can't change the setting, even before you lock down the knob. Obviously, this is a miter saw, but look at how the detents work. Again, a satisfying pop, and there's no way to move the thing once the detent is engaged. So I'd love to see this system redesigned. Keep the round-headed pin, keep the spring, but maybe just design those detents with straight walls. There could be some reason why they do it this way, but it just seems like it's really not helping the situation. I don't know why they would want to do that. Now, reading the manual, it seems pretty clear to me that they do intend for this thing to lock in securely enough that you need to push the button to pull the pin out. But just like on the original MG-36, it's just not necessary. In fact, I think I said it best last time. The detents are nothing but mild speed bumps. Now, to be clear, what I experienced on the original MG-36 is what I consider to be a deal breaker. I just couldn't trust that I was getting the settings I was supposed to have. On the Pro version, I do feel that with that little shimmy and then just verification with the vernier scale, you should be able to nail it each and every time. So I do think it's a lot more dependable. So while I think this particular system is really not as good as it should be, it is serviceable. It will work with those extra steps. So I think this is, a trust but verify situation. The fence on the Pro is pretty much identical to the old version, as far as I can tell. While they say on the website that the fence goes to 36 inches, just like the original, I actually found that the Pro can extend to nearly 40 inches. Now, that's great. More capacity is more capacity. But like I said with the original MG-36, 36 inches is still not the longest on the market. It wasn't then, and it isn't now with the 40-inch. And they still say that it's the longest on the market. Look, I get it. Changing copy on a website is probably a big pain in the butt, and it was likely just a copy-paste situation. But like I tell my kids, nobody likes a liar. The fact that they didn't fix the old page and they continue to lie on the new page is just a real bad look. The only other thing I need to point out about the fence is that the unit I received had a weird issue where the red extension piece would tilt back whenever I locked it down. The angle was enough for the bottom of the extension to kick out in front of the fence face. Now, normally this wouldn't be a huge problem, especially if the tilt all existed behind the front face of the fence. If it's behind the fence, it's not really going to impact anything. But in this case, it tilted enough that it actually kicked out at the bottom, which means that any long pieces that actually reach that are going to wind up being sort of registered incorrectly on the fence by bumping it out a little bit. So of course I contacted Harvey about this, and we did a couple of tests back and forth to try to determine what was causing this to happen. We couldn't figure it out, so they asked me to send it back so they could inspect it. And they did send me a replacement. They were super helpful, super responsive, and I did wind up getting a replacement. That was perfect, no problems with this one at all. The micro-adjustable stop has also received some updates. On the previous version, I had two criticisms. One was that the flip stop arm had an above average amount of deflection under pressure. And that's been improved with the new version, and there's very little deflection to speak of. Awesome. I also didn't like how the original arm sat 1/8 of an inch off the surface of the table, making the stop useless for thin stock. That gap increased to 5/16 of an inch when I used the sacrificial fence. No bueno. On the Pro version, however, the gap without a sacrificial fence is, well, there's no gap. We get full contact with the table surface. Unfortunately though, because of the arm shape and position, there's a full 5/8 of an inch gap between the stop and the fence. So if you plan to go commando with no sacrificial fence, the stop is useless for anything under 5/8 of an inch. Now, you can actually get away with this design if you design everything else to accommodate it. I think Incra has a 2-position stop where you can move it forward or back to accommodate a sacrificial fence. Jessem has the arm itself that actually can be moved forward and back. Some have 2 tracks on the top of the fence, which means you could have your stop in the front track for a sacrificial fence or in the rear track when you don't have a sacrificial fence. I don't think this is a deal breaker because if you're like me, you roll with a sacrificial fence all the time anyway, but I do think to get the most out of this thing, a sacrificial fence is going to be a requirement and not an option. Unfortunately, I found something else wrong with the stop. Every time I tightened it down, I found that I could easily rotate the stop just slightly. It didn't look like much, but I decided to measure it. So I clamped a block of wood to the fence right up against the stop, and then I gave the stop a light bump to initiate the rotation, and then measured the resulting gap between the stop and the wood. While the results did vary slightly each time I did this, the gap averaged about 12 thousandths of an inch. So is 12 thousandths really something to worry about? We being too nitpicky here? I think it depends on you, and it depends on the kind of work that you do and your expectations. I know for me, 12 thousandths, while it doesn't seem like a lot, that would get real frustrating, especially if I'm cutting tenons and I find that those shoulders are off by 12 thousandths. That's going to be a real problem for me. And I think Harvey would agree with me that this is a problem. Based on conversations with them, they recognize it, and they have a scale here that allows you to adjust to every thousandth of an inch. So having a 12 thousandth error in a device that actually lets you adjust by 1,000th, clearly a design flaw. Now, I no longer have access to the original MG-36, so I went to our guild and asked if anyone actually has it and if they could send me a picture so I could see what's going on. And I think I found something that could be the culprit. The way the stop engages with the T-slot, there's a spine that drops down into the slot and then a nut secures everything in place. In the original version, that spine is probably a little bit under 3 inches long. On the new one, they've reduced that spine by about 50% to 1.5 inches. So it stands to reason that even when under pressure, you have more potential to rotate with a shorter spine than you would have with a longer one. So in my talks with Harvey, it appeared that they were unaware of this issue, and when they sent me the replacement gauge, they also sent along a larger red knob. I guess it helps a little, but there's still a decent amount of movement. And just so you know, for a few more data points, I did ask around to a couple of people who have the new Pro version and asked them if they see that same kind of deflection and movement in the stop, and they did. I mean, unfortunately, they didn't know about it before, but they know about it now. Now, if you go back to the original review, you can get all of the information about the customer service situation that I had with Harvey. This time around, I have to say, it was great. They were absolutely responsive, bent over backwards to help me with this. They sent a replacement. They sent me the red knob. Now, unfortunately, the red knob didn't really fix the problem, but they certainly fixed the fence tilting issue with the extension. And they were absolutely willing to do anything that was necessary to make it right, even if the product was just engineered poorly and there's a problem that they can't fix right now. So I can't be any happier with the customer service I received. Now, I should also mention, I recently purchased Harvey's Ambassador C14 bandsaw, and I love that thing, but when it was shipped, there was a little bit of damage. There was a pin that needed to be replaced. They were super helpful with that, got me the new pin, and for my trouble, even gave me a small refund, which was very much appreciated. Totally unnecessary, but certainly appreciated. So customer service, at least from my experience, was top notch. Now, I am by no means one of those people who has that sort of like, don't you know who I am personalities.
I'm kind of a big deal.
In fact, most of the time when I try to order something, if I can, I try to put it in someone else's name. I do take some steps to try to anonymize it a little bit so that I can have a fair assessment of customer service. But in this case, I just ordered it. I used my name. I wasn't even thinking about any of this stuff. And of course, my email is very clear who I am. So maybe that impacted the kind of service that I received.
People know me.
But generally speaking, I don't hear bad things about Harvey's customer service, and people generally talk very loudly when they have bad customer service. So my gut tells me that if you have an issue, they're going to take care of you. So let me sum up by saying that Harvey fixed, or at least improved, every single problem that I had with the MG-36, but they also introduced a couple of new problems. Now, the fence issue, we're going to give them a pass on that because the replacement worked perfectly fine, but the issues that I found with the stop are definitely troubling. And the stop is a real problem for me. I mean, it's one step forward, 2 steps back. The previous stop worked pretty well, had a couple of flaws, but they weren't deal breaker flaws like I found in this one. So, I mean, I guess this is what happens when you iterate on designs. It's just unfortunate. Now, keeping all these improvements in mind, I think that the MG-36 Pro is in a much better position than the original, as long as you remember that detent issue and having to give it that little wiggle. But if you do that, it's gonna work perfectly fine. So, should you buy the MG-36 Pro? As always, this depends on you. The previous one, I gave a do not buy recommendation because I felt it had a couple of fatal flaws. This one is not that. If the stop issue doesn't bother you, I say go ahead. If you like the way it looks, you get a good price, you'll be totally fine. So you may be wondering, does this change anything in my determination on the original review? Well, it certainly adds points into the column for Harvey. But I still think Jessem has the upper hand. Jessem is still going to be the king. I'm not going to replace mine with the Harvey at this point. One of the things I had a problem with on the Jessem was that they didn't have a micro adjustable stop. Well, they saw the video, they agreed with me, and they made one. And it's fantastic, it works great. So right now, the Jessem ticks all the boxes for me, but the Harvey is definitely better than it was before. So big kudos to Harvey for addressing so many of these issues and making the product better and having great customer service to boot. Now, some of you may be thinking I'm being way too picky about stuff like this, but honestly, that's my job, guys. Like, I'm here to be picky about it. I'm going to report what I see, and then it's up to you to decide if those details matter to you. But I consider it my job to be picky about this stuff. But when it comes down to it, like Harvey says in their slogan, good enough is not enough. I couldn't agree more. And now for a little bit of vindication. Some of you may recall that after I posted my review, a few Harvey fanboys posted their rebuttals, letting me know what I got wrong in my review. I don't usually get involved in the drama, so I just kind of let it be what it was. But I do have a question for those folks now. If it wasn't broken, why did they fix it? Aha! So I hope you enjoyed my updated review on the Harvey MG-36 Pro. And because I'm already happily married to a miter gauge, I don't necessarily need this one. I'm gonna give it away. I'm gonna give it away to someone here right on YouTube. Just leave a comment in the comment section that says, my girl likes to Harvey all the time. My girl likes to Harvey all the time, Harvey all the time. And we'll pick a winner, probably we'll give it a few weeks and pick a winner from the comments. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Ooka-laka-leaky. Come on, you wanna lay me? Pass the poi, mahalo. Yeah. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it. And you wind up with slight. Oh, jeez, sorry. That was bad.
I'm very important.
All right. I got work to do, man. Let it go. Let it go. You're crazy. Okay, I'd like that back now. That's mine. I want my arm back. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Ow. Enough. You're gonna ruin my jacket, and then I'm gonna get in trouble. You're gonna ruin my jacket! No, I'm serious, man. Look cool.
Look at that face. Coming in, come on. Bit of hair, bit of hair. Smashing. Okay.